Hello and welcome to Historical Gameplay, where we blend history and gaming and employ video games to recreate historical events. The idea here is very simple. We choose a historical game, we pick a character or a faction, and we immerse in their history as opposed to a freestyle type of gameplay. So we play historically, try to achieve historically relevant goals, and expand according to patterns of historical expansion so that it matches historical events, and by doing so we recreate history behind this faction or a character. I wanted there to be a bit of an educational angle to this, so it's not only an entertainment, it's not only something that you watch for amusement and to relax, but also hopefully there's a thing or two that could be taken away from this in a kind of a edutainer sort of a package where you have education and entertainment combined. Now the game of choice for this series is, as you can see, Rome 2 Total War is the title by one of my favorite game developers, the Creative Assembly. For those of you who know nothing about the Creative Assembly by any chance, or about their games, it would suffice to say that it's one of the successful, in my opinion, one of the most attractive platforms for people who combine interest in history with interest in video games. Another thing that Creative Assembly has managed to create around its titles, around its games, is of course the massive, very creative community of fans. So what we have here today is a labor of love of the community, is the amazing DVD at Impera mod by Dresden and his brilliant team. We have version 123F, it's the public beta here installed, so we'll be taking that for a spin. We have several other submods installed, like 12 turns per year. We have increased the unit upkeep and prices, and we also have music, original Rome Total War music here, and we have Benjin's excellent male spice for Rome's and Greek and for Greece mod. Certain other things, you will find the description to all these mods down in the description below. The links will be there. Another set of links will be about bibliography, historical sources that are relevant here, things like Ancient Warfare magazine, things like Ancient Encyclopedia, works of Plutarch, etc. Now, the character that we chosen for this series is the famous Pyrrhus of Epirus. Why Pyrrhus? Well, Pyrrhus is, for me personally, he hadn't had much luck the way Alexander the Great had, for example, because his father was defeated. Pyrrhus was forced to flee, attempted to return, so his childhood was spent, much of it was spent in exile, and he was essentially, at the mercy of other kings and patrons. He returns eventually and creates this, the kingdom, but not one kingdom. He's a king of different places at different times. We'll return to this later. So he had very rough upbringing, very rough childhood, but he managed to sort of consolidate what he had and expand it at different points in different places. Another thing that is actually amazing about him is that he's the only Hellenistic king who actually managed to defeat the Romans. He did it not once but twice. The only another potential example for this would be Mithridates of Pontus, Mithridates Eupator, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. So let's just, without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. Right, so I skipped the introduction here because what they say about Epirus is more relevant to 272 BC than 278, because of course 272 is where a vanilla game, original game starts. Here, DVD at Impera, we have 278. You will also notice that it's winter, it's February, because we have 12 turns per year installed. So what I'm going to do first, we have the first objective, completely control 2 provinces, and we're gonna get a bit of a reward. So what I want to do, this episode is going to be an introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about the origins of Epirus, a little bit about its geography, about the people inhabiting it and what it was famous for. So the second episode will return later and we'll talk about what happened to Pyrrhus, why is he where he is, what led to this event, about his expeditionary force, numbers, battles, and all the rest of it. So right now, let's just focus on the Epirus, on the origin of this land. So a bit of a history here. We do not know exactly much about this land. There is a presence, human presence, dating back to Neolithic period. We know there were people were scattered in the villages because the walled cities here, walled towns, are not present up until about 4th century BC, so we do not have that. What we do know is that there are 14 tribes inhabiting the area. We know there are 3 main ones. There's Chaonians, they are mentioned by Thucydides. They live up north in the northern Epirus. We have Thesprotians. The Thesprotians, they live down in the southern Epirus, and in the central Epirus we have the Molossian tribe. Okay, they're the biggest, and they give the Epirus their kings. As you can see here, Pyrrhus is a member of Molossian Aeacide dynasty, because his father's name was Aeacides and he was killed, and Pyrrhus therefore had to flee, and we'll revisit that theme at some point during next episode, I hope. What else do we know? So 14 tribes, 3 major ones, split into geographical areas here. Another thing that Epirus was famous for, it's the oracle of the Donian Zeus, and it's the oldest one in Greece. It's mentioned by Herodotus, and it goes all the way back to the 2nd millennia BC. It's located somewhere around this area. So being the oldest in Greece, it's also been the 2nd in prestige and fame to Delphi. So Delphi was the most obvious choice, of course, the most famous oracle, but the Donian Zeus was 2nd in prestige to Delphi, although it was, like I said, the older oracle than the Delphi. Now, before I move on, just a quick note on the terms I'm using, names, places, etc. So what I'm trying to do here is use English as much as possible. So for example, instead of Demetrius Polarkitis, I would say Demetrius the Besieger, and I would use Latinized version of names and places instead of Greek where appropriate. For example, Alexander instead of Alexandros, so that way I do not create extra barriers. I'm just using the language that is the most familiar to you, so hopefully it's gonna lead to this kind of relaxed experience when gameplay watched, and maybe hopefully a couple of historical facts would settle in and you will retain them. So what else to say here about Epirus? Mythical hero that is associated with this land who was the descendant of the kings is, of course, Neoptolemus. Neoptolemus was the only son of the famous Achilles. Achilles is, as you probably know, most famous for his participation in the Trojan War here. So he takes Neoptolemus with him. Neoptolemus is this very bloody, very violent character. He's famous for, killing Priam, the king of Troy. He kills Priam's daughter. He slaughters Hector's son. Hector is, of course, the son and heir to Priam. And then what he does, Neoptolemus, he carries Adramaki, Hector's wife, as a concubine with him. So he takes her and he returns not to Thessaly, his original homeland, but goes to Epirus. Here he has 3 sons with her, but he eventually killed himself here in Delphi because his first wife, with whom he had no children, her husband kills him. So Neoptolemus killed by the husband of his first wife. Adramaki, unlike the first wife, had 3 children with him, and these 3 children, Molossus, one of the sons, will be the next king after Neoptolemus, but it's Molossus' brother who will give the Epirus and the dynasty of their kings. So Neoptolemus is this mythic hero, and after him we have the whole dynasty of the kings. We do not exactly know how the lineage is traced all the way down to Pyrrhus, but we know quite a lot of the kings that preceded him. For example, Alexander of Epirus was uncle of Alexander the Great, and when Alexander marched east to fight the Persians, Alexander of Epirus marched west to fight the enemies of this Spartan colony here at Taras. It should be, by the way, on this side, not here. This is Brundisium. So this is what we know. Alexander is credited with assembling the kingdom, like assembling the tribes into kind of an assembly with him as a king at the head of it. So this is a brief history of the place. So I've mentioned the oracle, I've mentioned the geography. As you can see, it's quite mountainous. We have 3 major tribes in 3 different areas here. And yeah, so we'll come back to the second episode and hopefully start looking at the current state of affairs, why we have the situation that we have here. So if you have any questions, comments or concerns, please post them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the comments.